volunteers would come in and they would say, listen, I'm willing to do this type of thing for somebody or that type of thing. And we would then take information in from people who needed help, and we would try to pair people with people in need with people willing to meet the need.
All right, we're recording. Hi, Kevin. Thanks for coming on today.
You're welcome. Good to see you, Brett.
Thanks. So for everybody, Kevin Johnson is the owner of Clefane Hyson Johnson Law Firm in Brockport, New York, Sweden, and is also the town supervisor for the town of Sweden as well. So Kevin and I have had a business relationship in the past, and so I figured who better right now as far as community and all this stuff going on with COVID to come on the podcast and talk a little bit both about his law firm and experience as town supervisor during this time. So Kevin, if you wouldn't mind just going into a little bit about your law firm, maybe we can start there first and talk about maybe how you got started, what drove you into being an attorney.
Yeah, certainly. Well, first of all, I want to congratulate you for this new effort of yours. I think it's very interesting, and I'm sure it's informative to those who watch everything that you put out. I think it's a great thing, and I wish you all the best in all your efforts.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. In terms of my law firm, we are a general practice, meaning we handle quite a few different types of matters. Primarily, we handle a lot of real estate, both residential and commercial. In addition to that, we handle a great deal of estate probate and administration, meaning when somebody passes on, how we handle the administration of all of their assets. So we do a lot of that, as well as estate planning, elder law. And then we do a lot of small business counsel formations, so creation of LLCs, corporations, those sorts of things. We handle a lot of landlord-tenant matters. So really, if you ever have, I often encourage clients to think of us like their doctor. In other words, the doctor may not be able to handle everything, but you go to him first, and if he can't handle it, he sends you to somebody he trusts who can handle that particular issue. So I think we serve as that resource for a lot of our clients. So that's the firm. In terms of the town, I've been involved in town politics for some years. I was involved on the library board and the board of assessment review for about a year and a half, 2 years, and then a board position opened. So I ran for town board, and I was on the town board for about 4 years. Then a town judge position opened, and so I was town judge for 4 years. And then what happened is one of the current supervisor at that time decided he wasn't going to run again, and so I ran for supervisor, and that was about 2.5 years ago at this point. So held a number of different positions within the town. Supervisor is I think the most interesting thus far, because you're really leading the town in the direction you see best for the town. So working with 4 other board members it can be at times challenging, but it's rewarding. And I'll be honest with you, I think you end up with a lot better decisions than if one person were making the decisions, because everybody brings a different perspective to every decision we have to make. And I think it's a good thing to collaborate with the other board members.
Sure. How did you get started? Maybe specifically as an attorney first. Was this something that you were always passionate about?
Well, I think my mom would tell you I always liked, let's say, arguing or thinking through things and telling my parents why what they were telling me didn't make any sense. I think where the idea for law really, caught fire in my mind was in the government class in high school. I had a government teacher who she really focused on current events, and I became very interested in politics and in policy and understanding issues and trying to persuade others on my opinion on particular issues. And I think that really, drove it. I may have had ideas before that, but I think that's what really cemented it. I then went to St. John Fisher and studied political science and history. And when I got to the end of undergrad, I wasn't quite sure that I wanted to go to law school right away. I was never really a big fan of school generally. I really liked working, whatever it was. Whatever I could find a job doing, I would do. So I took, I think, 2 years off, maybe 3. And I got married in that period of time. And then I went back to law school at the University of Buffalo. And from there, worked at a firm in Rochester for a couple of years right after law school called Thomas & Solomon. They did employment law, class actions, or collective actions. And they did those all across the country. So there was a lot of travel and quite long hours involved there. Good firm. I mean, certainly I don't mean that as a criticism. It's just a different type of practice than really, I think, best suited me. I always really wanted to be what you would think of as a small town lawyer. So then an opportunity came up with this firm that I currently own. And it just so happens that we were close family friends with the people who owned it. So I ended up connecting with them, starting out there. And then about a year later, worked out a purchase of the firm. And that was back in 2011 now. So about 9-10 years ago. Wow.
Yeah. Time goes by quick. Even the 2.5 years or so that you've been supervisor, that's been quick.
Yeah, I know.
What, if any, obstacles did you have to overcome initially? So I ask this to a lot of business professionals when they first start in their careers. You start kind of bright-eyed and ready to conquer the world, and maybe not from a negative standpoint, but there are some obstacles that maybe weren't quite ready for or understood were there. Were there any of those when you first started as an attorney?
Yeah, I think that there are a number of things in the business climate generally when it comes to law. First of all, small firms are in large part being swallowed up by larger firms. So you see a lot fewer small firms than there used to be in decades past. So I was sort of running counter the trend in going to a small firm. And so bringing our firm from, I think, the technological past, even some of the practice, the ways that we handled our practice at that time when I first started there, were a bit outdated. And so to modernize the firm and try to catch up with where the legal industry was headed, and in other words, not being dragged along, that was a big challenge. Technologically, I think that's how we first got to know each other, was through the IT work that for the company you used to work for. The IT work that they did for our company helped tremendously, as well as a lot of other things that we've done, innovating and doing things on our website and social media, et cetera. So modernizing the firm, I think, was a big challenge. Plus, the legal industry, when you're trying to convince people that your advice is worth listening to, they have to respect you. And so gaining people's respect is not something that just happens automatically. It takes time, it takes effort, and you really have to look at each client and say, I got to do my very best for this person. Got to be careful to bill them appropriately so that you can keep the business open, but also so that they don't feel abused. That's a common complaint with lawyers. Well, I spent too much more money than it was worth. So I wanted to always avoid that. Doesn't mean you can avoid every billing dispute or concern, but you do your very best to make sure people understand that the value that they're getting for the money that they're spending. So gaining people's respect. And then I think beyond that, just fitting in the legal industry, I think if you look at your industry, it's probably dominated by young people. Right. The legal industry is the inverse. It's the older generations that have the clout, that have the sway, they have the client base, they have the respect of people. And so you have to prove that you belong in that group. And because of pretty much every matter you work on, you're working with other attorneys, and it takes a period of time for them to respect you. As well as to treat you as though you fit in. So there were challenges in that, and I think that we've done that very well. And it helps that the firm mean, the firm's been around since 1957, so there's a lot of history in the firm, and people respect it, both in the community but also the legal industry. But I was still, at one point, I was still the new kid on the block. So
Sure, yeah.
over a period of time, though, I think it's transitioned where people really see me as the face of the firm now, and I'm happy for that.
Yeah, as you're speaking, what I was thinking of was how you have to invest in people and grow relationships. And I'm sure especially with the town supervisor position, you have to kind of go the extra mile and be that type of people person. Have you always been that type of person, or is that something that you've had to work on? Some people just that naturally comes to them is, they gravitate towards people and they're extroverts. Others, it's more of a, comes over time.
Sure. No, I tend to be an extrovert. I thrive on being around and with other people. I will tell you though that there are times, especially because I have those two different roles professionally at the town and at the firm, and both of them are in the community in which I live. It's not as though I drive to Rochester and then I come home and I'm sort of out of the.
Sure.
So it's in that sense there are times where you're like, I just want to go somewhere and not be, not have to deal with, because I'll be honest with you, you go to Wegmans or I go to church and I spend a lot of time talking law or talking town politics, no matter where I go.
Sure.
And that's a good thing most of the time. But then there are times where you just say, I want to go someplace quiet. And that is something I never used to feel, but now I feel it. And I think it's just because of that constant flow of information and contact with people. So
sure.
We all need that, right? We need a break now and then.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of that, how do you manage both roles at the same time? I'd have to imagine that's a very tall task, really, just time-wise. Having to dedicate your time and effort into the business and firm that you own, but also devoting all the time that it takes to do the town supervisor job. Are there I guess challenges or anything that you've had to put in place to help control your time and spend it where it needs to be?
Well, I'm sure your parents talked to you about the same thing when you were young, but prioritization is the key. And I'm not saying that I'm always great at it, but faith, family, those two things have to come first always. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect at those things by any means, but we try to prioritize time with the family. And there are times, usually weekends, and then a couple evenings a week where I say, listen, these are evenings I'm going to be home. I'm going to be doing things with the family. And I sort of turn off the switch, and unless there's a crisis, I'm not dealing with anything from the town or the firm. So you do have to carve out those times and just say, unless it is a genuine crisis, because something's a crisis to everybody, I found. No matter how minor the issue, there are times where people think very minor things are crises. But unless it's a genuine crisis, this period of time is dedicated to something other than work. So maintaining that balance is one of the most important things. Making sure that the reason most of us work is to support our family. And so if you end up hurting or damaging your family over work, that's something has gone awry. So prioritization, making sure that family and in my life anyway, faith concerns are dealt with as a priority. Those things come first. Beyond that, though, the daily work of handling the town and firm work, it actually is a great balance. I find a pretty good balance anyway between the two of them. And the primary reason I'm able to do that is because of the people that I work with. Both at the town and at the firm, I have excellent people that work alongside me. And without them, there'd be no way of striking a good balance or doing both jobs well. And I really think that as a firm, we do an excellent job for clients, people. I think it's exceedingly rare that people feel like they they aren't getting the information, or their file isn't getting the attention that it needs. I mean, our rule of thumb at the firm is no phone call, no email, nothing sits for more than 24 hours. When I say that, I mean a work day. Obviously, if it's
Sure.
24 hours on a Sunday, that doesn't count. But
Yeah.
nothing sits for more than a day. And that is, we pretty much live by that rule. And that's rare with law firms. One of the most common complaints is, well, I never hear back. They never call me back. That won't be their experience with us. So if there's ever a concern, well, he's over at the town, I'm not sure I'll get my not in this situation. We have a great staff. We have 9 people that work at the firm, myself included, of course, but we have plenty of people to apply to any issue that a client brings us. So if we take your case, we're going to get to it. And at the town, we have a ton of stuff going on. I mean, we're really growing as a town. We have a number of large infrastructure projects that things that I really wanted to get done when I came into office, and they take a tremendous amount of work just because of the red tape and bureaucracy of government.
Yeah.
But we're moving them along, and things are moving, I think, in a very positive direction. We've done a ton of work at the town in 2 years, and these next 2 years is when a lot of the work that we've put in the last 2 years is going to come to fruition. And people, I think, are going to be thrilled about the way the town looks another 2 years from now. So to me, I don't know how it works, but there are days where you don't have enough time, of course. But
yeah.
In general, I keep up on things, and I'm thankful for it. And I think it's in large part due to the wonderful people I work with at both places who help manage and sort of take the ball and run.
Yeah, you touched on customer service a little bit there. You know, I think in service-based industries, you know, I've been a part of one back, you know, from IT and in the marketing company I own now, you know, and then yourself with, you know, dealing with individual clients, and I'm sure you've dealt with some businesses too. I feel like a lot of organizations kind of forget that aspect of customer service. It's so basic, and it's one of the foundational elements that it sometimes goes over people's heads, or they just don't double back to really think about how the other person on the other end feels. So I think that's super important. And I'm sure, you know, even in the supervisor position, I'm sure you carry that over. Now, circling back or around to Corona, how has that impacted things for the town? So you mentioned that you have things that you had scheduled or that you wanted to get done for the town, and I'm sure a lot of that either loses out to now a lot of time that you have to spend in figuring out everything with Corona, or maybe even just delayed. Maybe you could go into a little bit about the challenges that the town has faced early on with Corona, how you guys have adapted and overcome, and where things are now.
Mm-hmm. So at the town or the firm or both? Which are you looking for, Brett?
Yeah, both. I guess we could talk about both. Okay.
So the town has been the bigger challenge because in a representative town government like we are, what we have to really focus on is what do our residents want and expect out of their town government. So it's less about what my opinion is on things than it is about what do people expect and what should we reasonably do to accommodate their expectations. And I think there's been, and there's been a big war. Of course, just like every other issue in our society, there seems to be this political divide, even a pandemic. It does not discriminate. It infects anybody, but there's a lot of opinions as to whether the approach we've taken is right. And I tend to think that there's been some degree of overreaction, or we've done a bit more than we really needed to. I think there was probably a more tailored approach that could have been taken that would have still cared for those who are most vulnerable, and yet still protect what we have as a culture and a society. I mean, things I worry about the long-term repercussions of this approach that we've taken. And, when I hear people saying we may never have sports games, or maybe years before we do, or you can't go to an orchestra, can't go to a symphony performance anymore. Yeah. I mean, is that really what society we want to live in? We've never reacted to an illness that way before. And there have been a lot worse illnesses, the plague, all sorts of things. And it didn't. So I don't know. That concerns me, that people might be willing to just sort of hunker down long term. So it would really completely change the look of our society if that's the way we react to this long term. I can understand it for a couple months. I think we've all taken that approach in the hopes of helping our neighbors and helping each other. But there has to be a better long-term solution than that. We're not all meant to live that way. So anyway, I think trying to strike the right balance between the warring factions on this issue has been interesting. It has been a little bit difficult at times, not in terms of, it's not as though we're not building the Hoover Dam here, but it's been hard to make decisions and make sure that you're finding the right approach for our residents. Because just because something works in Rochester or in Brighton doesn't mean it works in Brockport, even though we're in the same county.
Sure.
So Sweden, I think we've struck a good balance. We've tried to keep our open places open, and what I mean by that is parks. Try to keep those available so people can get out and do some recreation or just take a walk or be outside with their family, not feel so confined in their own homes. So we've tried to keep some of the open places open. We've tried to keep our employees working, some in the office, some at home, doing whatever they can to keep the interests of the town moving forward. Because at the end of the day, the interests of the town are the interests of our residents. And every department of the town serves a particular resident issue or concern. So we didn't want to just drop the ball for a couple months. So we have done our best to try to limp through. Starting this past Monday, we now have all of our employees back in the office. We're not taking public in at this point, but for just over 2 months, we were more or less completely shut down to the public, and employees were only allowed in as necessary to keep up with the bare essentials. Now we have reopened everything to the employees. The public, that probably we're going to start allowing people in by appointment within the next week or two. That's the goal. And towns have been put in a little bit of a different position than private employers have. The town, any municipality, has been deemed essential right from the start. So we've been sort of left out of the requirement to quarantine, and yet we wanted to do it to be prudent about protecting the residents as well as protecting our employees. So we didn't have to shut down, but we did. But it has allowed us to, again, sort of limp along, still keep things going, albeit at a snail's pace, but keep the interest of the town moving forward. So that's what we've done at the town, and I'm glad to say it looks like we're on the downside of the mountain here, and everybody will be back. Not only is everybody back now, but we'll be allowing public in very soon.
Good. Yeah, it does seem like it is kind of winding down, and we are hopefully close. What have you seen community-wise? Something like this, unfortunately is such a negative, but there are some positives, some neat stories that come out of, community-wise and people doing positive things for each other. What have you seen in the town of Sweden as far as that's concerned?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I think when a crisis like this happens, I think there is a human reaction that the world gets a lot smaller. What you care about goes from my community or my country to all I care about is my family, and everybody else can, but you more or less don't care what happens. And I think initially a lot of people went to that very small place.
Yeah,
I'm taking care of me and my family and let everybody else go. I think as more information has come out on the disease and as people better understand things and we've learned more about the pathology of the disease or the epidemiology of the disease, I think people have begun to loosen up a bit more. But I'm also happy to say that some people took a much more community-oriented reaction right from the very start. But during this process at the town level, we've seen a lot of wonderful behavior. I mean, not only are there a lot of residents taking care of their neighbors and family and friends, shopping for elderly neighbors, or making sure that yard work gets done for people who really want to make sure they just stay inside, that sort of thing. That has already been done, and it needed no government action, thank God. To me, the less government we have, the better. Even as a person in government, I think the more that people just take on the responsibility of running their lives and running the country, and the less government has to do, the better off we all are. And a lot of people did that. We put out and started this program at the town, I would say probably halfway through it, called Neighbors Helping Neighbors, and we were accepting volunteer information. So volunteers would come in and they would say, listen, I'm willing to do this type of thing for somebody, or that type of thing. We would then take information in from people who needed help, and we would try to pair people with people in need with people willing to meet the need.
Oh, wow.
And we paired up quite a few people, I would say a dozen, maybe more than that. And we also, early on, before we started receiving these free paper masks, or the whatever the fabric is, but the mask that the county has provided, we had a large effort of people sewing masks, and we were handing those out. And we gave about 300 to the local fire department. We handed out a ton of them to the residents as well. And now that the paper masks or disposable masks have become available, we've handed out many of those. But in terms of the number of people we've helped, it's been relatively large, but not as large as a lot of us expected. And I think that's because, number one, a lot of people are just taking care of their own needs, but people are taking care of their neighbors, and nobody had to force them to do it. And to me, that's the best solution. I mean, that says a lot about the character of our community, that people knew there were needs and they went out and they met them. They didn't need somebody to tell them here. I think the goal of our effort at the town was really to say, what needs are not being met? Who's falling through the cracks? Who doesn't have that friend or family member that they can call, and make sure that we were meeting that person's needs and not leaving them alone or isolated. So that, I think, has been tremendous. We've also had a lot of requests for, hey, can I go pick up trash at the park? This past weekend, we placed all the flags. Every year we place flags at all the cemeteries on all the veterans' graves and to get ready for Memorial Day. There was no question or concern about, I don't want to get near anybody else or whatever. We have people phone ringing off the hook. When is the veteran flag placement going to happen? We want to be involved. So I think people are looking to reach outside of themselves, their own situation, to help others, to do things that are community oriented. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. I think we get so caught up in the rat race, the day to day. And I think a positive of this as well, at least in my opinion, is this sort of brings us back to more simpler times. Like you said, you start to really think about what matters to you. And I think that's shown quite a bit in a lot of the stories that I've heard, just community wise, people giving back, people willing to give their time. And, who knows, I'm sure a lot of those people still would have, outside of a time like this. However, I don't know, it feels like people are just a little bit more connected with those things that matter, and they're not as caught up in, for lack of a better term, that rat race that I mentioned. So I think that's a positive overall from what I've seen. So Kevin, as far as the town goes, are there term limitations to a town supervisor? No. So
good news is I have no intent on overstaying my welcome. I mean, I really am there to do my very best for the community in which I live. And once that has run its course, I'll be on my way to other things. I mean, I have plenty to keep me busy between family and the firm, but I'm really loving it right now. We're doing an awful lot of great stuff. And so I once that feeling and that sense runs out, well, then it'll be on. So yeah, no term limitations, but there will be some self-imposed, no doubt.
Gotcha. What about I know outside of the township, do you see yourself maybe venturing out into county politics or even higher than that?
It's, that's the common question of every politician, right? What are your plans or in your intentions?
Yeah.
The town situation fits me perfectly because it allows me to run a healthy, successful law firm. I have a great work-life balance. It takes me 2 minutes to get to get home. The town office is directly next door to the law firm. So it's an extremely convenient situation that I have, and it allows me to raise. I have 4 children. And I have a beautiful wife. To be active and involved in their lives. I do a lot of coaching, baseball in particular. Any other type of position or office would involve significant life changes that I'm not sure would be things I'd be willing to do or accept. So I'm not saying that it couldn't ever happen, but I would have to really understand the situation and understand how it would impact my personal life as well as professional life. We have a firm that, with the age of the firm, we have an enormous clientele in our local area. Those people have to be cared for. If I were not there starting tomorrow, there'd be a real problem in terms of meeting all their needs. And I take that very seriously. I don't ever want our clients feeling like they are searching for a solution. So I don't know. I'm open to anything in life, but right now what I have is really, it's ideal. So I kind of very happy where I am.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Makes total sense. Well, Kevin, I appreciate you coming on and sharing that info with us. It's very interesting hearing about, your beginnings and where you are now, and wish you and everybody at the town and your law firm nothing but the best. And hopefully baseball season starts soon for you.
Yes, indeed. Exactly. Thank you very much, Brett, for having me today.
Sure thing. Take care.